Hello, everyone. I hope you're all finding a comfortable space and that you're all getting seated. If you have another session to head to, feel free to do so. But I also invite you to stay for our current session, which is going to be Open Data Discotech, a group of lightning talks on the topic of open data and within the sphere of open data. I'm really happy to have all of you join us here today. This year, School of Data is closing out Open Data Week. And throughout the week, we've seen so many amazing talks centered around on the fringe of or in the center of what we all consider open data, data that is freely accessible and usable to all members of the public. And throughout this week, and as we close off at School of Data, I'm reminded of the multiplicity of data, and of course, that includes open data itself, and the fact that data really is what you make of it. And so today I'll be your host. I'm Dimitri Mimy. I work at BetaNYC. I'm a Civic Innovation Apprentice. And we love data, open data over here. We have an ambassadorship that introduces open data to members of the public in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation, OTI. And it's a really lovely part of our data sphere that deals directly with access and with making equity happen in tech spaces. And that's really wonderful. And throughout these talks today, what we're going to see is what people have done within their respective corners of the civic tech community, within the civic tech space, with just being the right people, having the right teams, or even just having the right ideas to get something started and kicked off and turn it into something really wonderful and that has a lot of potential. And so some of these people include people at BetaNYC. Some of these include other incredible teams that have been working across different spaces, different stakeholders, organizations to create really wonderful things. And that's what they're here to share with you today. And the stars of the show are going to be our 5 awesome speakers, Erik, Lizzie, Jonathan, Joel, and Kyla, whom you will soon meet. Just to give a brief run of show, we're going to get started with our first speaker in just a couple of minutes. And soon after that, we're going to go through the rounds and just see what each of them have to share with you today. I won't spoil. They're all very diverse and interesting subjects that deal with all sorts of different aspects of equity and different topics within the tech space. And it's really, really a treat to discover what you'll see in each of these sessions. After each speaker has had their turn sharing their little piece of their tech space with you, we're all going to reconvene here and have a Q&A. So I encourage you to keep your questions deep in your heads and in your hearts. And as soon as we've heard from each speaker, you guys are encouraged to share that out. And we'll all sit here at the center of the stage with microphones and get ready to take your questions and clarify anything that comes to mind. But the most important thing is that I want you guys to just keep an open mind and to just stay open to what these speakers will share with you today. And, who knows? You might be inspired. You might want to reach out. Anything can happen. And so within this celebratory spirit, I'm going to now hand off to our first speaker, Erik Browne. He's our associate here at BetaNYC, and he's going to be sharing with you something that he's put a lot of effort and care into. And it's going to be wonderful to see your reactions and to see him share this with you guys today. So Erik, if you'll come up. Sure.
Cool. So, my name is Erik. As Dimitri just said, I am the lab associate with BetaNYC. I'm also a senior at Fordham University, where I'm studying computer science, American studies, and data science. And today I will be presenting to you guys on centralizing community board calendars. So, I wanted to start things off with a story. What you see on the screen is an SUV parked outside of the Brooklyn Community Board 1 office. This SUV actually tells a story of democratic irresponsibility, and I felt it was proof of a greater need for community engagement. So I'm sure that everyone who knows and is familiar with the story already knows why I decided to start with this, but for those who don't know, this SUV is important because, according to the city, this SUV was actually purchased by the then community board manager, Gerald Esposito, using $26,000 of taxpayer money. The vehicle was then spotted parked outside of the home of the board manager overnight, potentially showing that it was being used for personal use. This money was distributed by the city council to help volunteer boards across the city during lockdown back in 2019. So I'm not going to say that this purchase was definitely a misuse of funds or that there was something better that the money could have been used on. However, I do believe that this should be a point of concern for us when, for many people, these community board meetings remain somewhat of a mystery because there's no central calendar of public events. Economists note that this might be a sign that someone should create one, and so that is what we set out to do. So the problem that we set out to address is the lack of a central hub for community board meetings, and we hope to solve this problem through the creation of an online centralized community board calendar. There were a few criteria that we hoped to judge our final product on. We wanted this calendar to be public, meaning that everyone who wanted access to it would be able to have access to it. Intuitive, so it is both easy to understand and use. And citywide, so the calendar has the calendars for all 59 boards. And we also wanted the calendar to be real time, so it updates as the community boards change their meeting information. So the way that we did this was a combination of a few different tools. Mainly, the main thing that we used was web scraping to gather all the info on each meeting from each of the individual 59 community board websites. We then saved all of this information to a SQL Alchemy database that we hosted locally. This database was then continuously updated using GitHub Actions so that we always have the most up-to-date information. We then plan to access this database and display all the available meetings on an easy-to-navigate UI. So the largest challenge that we ran into was that there is no standard for how community boards report their meetings. So over the next few slides, I plan to go over the process we used to scrape each of the different mediums and some of the different challenges that we ran into while scraping the calendars for each of the different community boards. So to start out, let's take a look at Google and iCalendars. These community boards used embedded Google calendars or iCalendars into their websites, and scraping these calendars was actually relatively easy. So both iCalendar and Google calendars can be accessed as ICS files, which can then be opened through the URL lib library in Python. Then we used the iCalendar library released by Plone to iterate through each of the events. We then saved each event to our SQL Alchemy database. A lot of this code actually came from another BetaNYC lab associate, so I wanted to give a shout out to Sujana for her contributions to this project. So next up, we can take some time to look at HTML calendars. These community boards use simple HTML on their websites to display updates on their meetings. Scraping these calendars was not quite as simple as the Google calendars, but still it was relatively simple. If you take a look at the example I have up on the board, then you see that there seems to be a uniform way that each of the different meetings is actually presented. We also noticed this pattern, and this pattern is sort of how we framed our entire scraping. So, as I covered in the previous slide, the key to parsing this information lied in the formatting of the text. To pick up on these changes in the formatting, we used the Beautiful Soup library to access the underlying HTML of each page. We then were able to pull out the label of each text. We were then able to label each text based on its tag as a meeting title or a date or a description. And finally, we use regex to pick out the key pieces of information such as meeting dates, times, and Zoom links. And then the same thing, after that, it was just saved to our database. Oh. I think my slides might be a little messed up. Yeah, I think I'm missing some slides. Let's see.
Did you add them right before the session?
I should mute. Okay, so we're having some trouble with the slides, so I'm just going to talk through it instead. The next one was actually a JavaScript calendar. These community boards used a combination of HTML and JavaScript to create an interactive calendar on their website. So the way that they would work is that when a user would click on like an event on the calendar, then usually more information would come up underneath that was like sort of hidden away. So the difference between that pages versus the HTML pages were like kind of different, but like it was still a lot of the same general like ideas. So the difference was that the JavaScript calendars made a fetch request to a file that holds all the information for each event rather than displaying it directly on the page. So by viewing what pages the JavaScript calendar makes a request to, we're actually able to locate the file where the event information was saved. And then we could just parse that information the same way that we parse the HTML information from the HTML calendars. So another one, which was very interesting, was actually a lot of other community boards are actually opting to use Airtable for their presentations. A lot of other community boards are opting to use Airtable for their presentations, which is a new tool that I'm sure some of you are familiar with. This was actually very interesting because then actually none of the information is actually like saved onto the site. So, but you are able to download a CSV which contains all of the information for the actual Airtable. So in order to actually access that, we used an automated browser service. We use the Selenium library to actually access each of the websites and go through as if a user would be clicking on the downloading link, and then just parse the information the same way. And then the last one was PDF calendars. The PDF calendars are actually the most complicated just because of how much variance there is between what one community board might have on their, post their calendar versus another community board, or even like how a community board can just choose to switch how they display their calendar from month to month. So we had to use some pretty interesting tools in order to get around that. The first one was that we used the Pillow library to identify areas of interest on the page. And however, it was only able to do that for actually JPEG images. So we had to convert the calendar from a PDF to a JPEG, find each of the areas of interest, and then approximate the text of the areas of interest using OCR, which is optical character recognition, and then score each of the areas of interest to decide which one is probably the calendar. And then after that, we just sort of parse the information using a PDF, using another library, Tabula, which is able to pull out tables from a PDF and then just parse the information through that. So the last thing that I wanted to cover that I think was really cool was that the database is only really useful if it is constantly updating. So in order to do that, we used GitHub Actions. This is a really cool tool where that is actually a continuous integration and delivery platform, which can periodically run through scripts for you. By combining this tool with our own scripts that I just sort of went over, we are able to have a real-time database of all the community board events. So just to close things out, we know that the problem goes much deeper than just people not knowing when these meetings are occurring, and that for many, other responsibilities make it difficult for them to attend these meetings regularly. However, this tool still provides those who have the desire to attend these meetings with the information that they need in order for their voices to be heard, and that's why we feel this project is worthwhile still. Cool.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Lizzie Alvarado and I'm a solutions engineer at Retool. And today we're going to be talking through some current options for building apps with public data, making your first Retool app if you decide that's the best way you want to build your app utilizing public data, walk through some next steps, and eventually we'll get to Q&A as a group. So to start off, I thought I would also tell a story similar to Erik. So I was walking through my neighborhood the other day, and I came across this chicken coop, actually complete with a coin-operated feeding station. Highly recommend going. It's in Prospect Heights, lots of fun. And it really got me thinking about where are all of these placemaking sites throughout New York, whether they're murals or other chicken coops, or just places that really make neighborhoods unique. And I think a lot of times these individual, maybe crowdsourced places throughout New York, although they're very important to neighborhood identity, are a lot of times missing from our handy-dandy open data portal and tools. And so I started to think, okay, what if I were to combine in a public data app something like a parks properties data set and crowdsource information about placemaking sites throughout the city? And because these chickens are very technically savvy and require a lot from my public apps, they're looking for graphs and charts and forms and tables and databases and data transforms and APIs and logs, and who am I to tell the chickens no? So it started to get me thinking, what are my options for building a public data app? Really, I think they fall into two categories, one of them being some basic requirements. So you're working with a single data set. You don't have to do a ton of transforms. You just have a few UI elements like a form, and you want to display data in a table, for example. That we can accomplish really easily and well right now with Airtable and Sheets and Forms, as well as the NYC Open Data portal, and we don't need to overcomplicate things. But again, I'm looking to make a little bit more of a complex app. I want to connect to things like APIs. I want to display data in a bunch of elements, from graphs to charts, to tables to forms, to calendar elements. And I want to aggregate a bunch of data, maybe even set up some of those automated workflows that Erik was talking about, maybe make a mobile app or store data in a database as well. For that, I really have two options. Either I build it totally from scratch using a framework like React, Angular, Vue, or I build it in Retool, which is what I'm going to be advocating for today. So some of the downsides of my first option. If I choose to build totally from scratch, I'm going to have to manage a bunch of infrastructure and services. I'm going to have to think about how to integrate with all of these data sources and even make CSS style sheets, right, just for a basic open data app. That's where Retool comes in. Retool is a faster and simpler way to get closer to that build from scratch feel, and makes it faster and easier to build tools that still meet a high bar that even the chickens would approve of. Faster and more efficient building. So how does Retool work? First, you connect and write to any data source, as well as read from any data source. Then you drag and drop out-of-the-box components, so you don't have to build them yourself. You connect them, those queries and those out-of-the-box elements, customize with SQL and JavaScript, and then you have working apps much, much faster. So let's go through building your first Retool app. First, you sign up. Everyone gets a plan. There's a free plan. Next, we're going to drag and drop some elements like tables and calendars and everything that you could really want into the main frame. Then we're going to write some queries. So for example, I want to connect to the parks properties data set. I take that endpoint, put it right into Retool, and I'm returning all or a limited set or a filtered set of those parks properties. Next, I need to connect those components and the queries with a single string of JavaScript, statement of JavaScript, and then I'm going to add a theme. So we don't have to mess around with CSS style sheets at all, and then we're ready to publish and share. So for example, I built this app utilizing Retool that allows me to search that open data to find a specific park, see it on a map, for example, but then also display some data too with some very basic charts and graphs that could become even more complex, and then crowdsource some information from other folks throughout New York so that I can find other spots like that throughout the neighborhoods. Really excited to see what you end up building with Retool. And I have taken it upon myself to build a bunch of other apps as well. So finding link NYC locations, for example, by zip code and status, or even monitoring evictions throughout different neighborhoods by neighborhood tabulation area, census tract, and more. So again, when should you consider using Retool? When you want to connect to APIs or dynamic data stores, you want to display multiple data types and a bunch of different components like graphs, charts, calendars, and more, and you want to aggregate data, even create mobile apps, automated workflows, even store data as well, and you value your time as well. Awesome, so some next steps. Please sign up for a plan. Look out for this email list on future Civic Tech events. This is going to be displayed on the next slide as well if you miss it. And search Retool tutorials because I really, really can't wait to see what you build with Retool. I'm going to leave this up for a second, and then I'm going to pass off to Jonathan. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Gao, and I'm going to be presenting NYC Aware, which is a project I did to visualize weather and collision data for safer streets. So a little about me first. I'm Jonathan Gao. I study business, technology, entrepreneurship, and computer science at NYU. I know it's a mouthful. And I'm interested in the intersection between business and technology in a lot of growing industries. So about a bit of an overview. First, I'm going to go over my inspiration for this project. I'm going to look at the data, the challenges, and I'm going to show with a lot of examples the results and some insights that I got from my project. So first, the inspiration came from my personal experience transporting myself around NYC. So I noticed there's excellent public transport around here, lots of micro-mobility options, and relatively efficient traffic flow, despite there being a lot of traffic jams. But I also noticed that there's kind of an interesting relationship between cars on the road and everyone else, cyclists, pedestrians, e-scooter riders. And that relationship can get quite a bit dicier in inclement weather conditions, as I experienced myself. So now I took a look at some data from the motor vehicle collisions data table in the New York City Open Data portal. This is based on police reports coded MV104AN, which is required to be filled out for a collision where someone was injured or killed, or there was at least $1,000 worth of damage. So these are more serious accidents or more major, there's less like fender bender type accidents. These have much more real impacts. So the data, if you can see a bit of it on the left there, involves a lot of different columns of information. There's information such as vehicle types, casualties and injuries, latitude and longitude, a total of 28 columns. And it's all kind of transposed from these previously coded police reports. So it's qualitative data, not necessarily native to the quantitative data space. So of course, no data is clean, but most is useful. So the challenge that I came in looking at was how might we use this data to improve transportation safety? That's the human-centric need. And what I found was it was kind of difficult to aggregate all the clean data from all of, again, this qualitatively based data from the police reports. And it can also be a little difficult to gain an intuition when there's just so much data within this data set. Again, large volumes that I need to parse through. And I also wanted to look at gaining deeper insights into this data. For example, what might have caused the accidents? So I came up with some solutions. Now, I wish it looked this clean here. There's a problem and there was a solution. But every single one of these problems required a bit of a journey. So for aggregating clean data, I mainly started with pandas, but I realized I also needed to use a bit of SQL to left join data from another API called Meteostat, which I used to, on the right, gain insight into what might have caused crashes, with my hypothesis being inclement weather events are causing increased transportation danger, essentially. And finally, I wanted to build for accessibility. Now this was, I went through a lot of options. Originally, I started with this tool called Mapbox, which required reverse geocoding, which is taking street names and turning them into coordinates and plotting those coordinates onto polygons that essentially represent New York City neighborhoods. However, this didn't exactly work with the rest of my code, and so I settled on another library, Python library called Folium, which integrated very nicely with Jupyter Notebooks, which I was building this project in. Now, you'll see in the next slides the results of Folium, but it is basically a library that allows easy manipulation of data and visualization of data onto real-world locations. So the result, NYC aware, visualizing NYC crash data during various inclement weather events. So on the left there's the result. It's a bit of a video, so you can see the integrations of Folium and the visualizations. So I plotted accident reports onto an interactive map of New York. So every single one of those blue dots represents an accident. They're also clickable, and there are annotations that pop up that might note sometimes when there was an available or easily established cause of an accident, what that cause was. I also looked into creating heat maps of accident data based on weather events. For example, that is the rain accident data by the frequency of accidents in New York City. You'll see certain locations are more dangerous than others. I also created heat maps of accident data based on injuries, so the real impact. You'll notice that this is plotting accidents during rain, similar to the last map, but it has different hotspots based on where it might be most dangerous or where intersections cause the most injuries when an accident occurred. I also filter data by different inclement weather events. For example, ice accident data, which is plotted around New York City. And I compared these maps for insights. For example, I compared the two maps. These are both ice accident data maps, comparing injuries and accident frequency. And you'll notice that they're quite similar. This implies that although accidents might not be as common during icy conditions in New York City, as this map doesn't have a lot of red, when they do occur, they're more dangerous on average than accidents that are correlated by rainy conditions, for example, as we saw in the past slides. So some insights I've gained is, one, improve uptown traffic flow on bridges. In all of my maps, that area always lit up red, so it seems there might be some way to improve that. Work to increase driver attention, which was the most common annotation for the cause of the crash, and to improve intersection visibility in poor conditions, as in most conditions, I would say 95% of the accidents when I went through the data, not just based on the visualization, list driver inattention or some form of not following proper traffic etiquette to be a contributing factor, or at least one of them. And that was my project. Thank you so much. I guess while I have the stage, I'm also looking for a summer internship, so if anyone knows anything, yeah, please let me know. Thank you so much.
Hey, good afternoon. Let's see now. So I'm here to talk about APIs for the people, or what I want to like to call the answering people interface. So I'm sure in this audience, this definition is not needed, but as I wanted to call out that this is basically people thinking like machines, right? And in this day and age of ChatGPT and everything else, AI, I think it would be great if we can just give answers, right? And we're really blessed here in New York City. We have this great open data portal. But at the end of the day, if you want to interact with the SODA API, even with the tool like Lizzie's Retool, you still have to have a little awareness I mean, we're making all these new tools to really make getting answers easier, but sometimes a community board member just wants an answer, right, without having to interact with the portal. You know, they don't necessarily have the background or the programming skills to really get the data, right? I just want the answer, and now I want the answer now. So like I said, we are blessed with all this big open data here in New York City. We have a tradition of open data even before the open data law, like Noel pointed out earlier today with COPIC, with the Green Book, with the data dictionaries. Even this was before Obama. This was before Tim Berners-Lee called for raw data now, which gave birth to open data, right? So we're really, truly blessed. But can I ask quick answers? I just want my answer. I want it to be fast. I want it to be repeatable. No specialized skills required. I just know Excel and I know to click a button, right? And it would be good if it's open source, so I don't need to pay anything. And you know, I just let them have the big data. I just want small data answers. So my company was born of open data. We tried doing something like this 10 years ago. Oh man, 10 years ago. With what we built, NYCpedia, and what we did with that is we compiled neighborhood indicators. So we said, okay, people are interested in crime data, people are interested in accident data, and then they know things like their neighborhood. They don't necessarily know their precinct. They don't necessarily know their congressional district. They just want to see, oh, I live here. What can you tell me? So we did something like that, and you know, when we got acquired by OpenGov, you know, it was open source. They didn't want to continue it, so it kind of died. And now, like I mentioned, we you know, people are kind of getting scared with ChatGPT. I tried asking a question of ChatGPT about New York City's open data portal, and it kind of just said, oh, it's available there, just go there. It doesn't really answer it yet. Maybe ChatGPT 10, when 4 just came out. Last year, I gave a talk about this thing that we built. You know, we built this tool. We were hired by a hedge fund to catalog all their data, not open data, older data behind their firewall. And we built a crawler that basically crawled all their databases, compiled all the metadata, and then pumped it into a data catalog using CCAN. And we built a tool for that. You know, they're still using that thing, but thankfully they said, okay, you can open source it, and we came up with this thing called QSV. It's what I call a CSV data wrangler. When I first gave a talk last year, I promised I was going to give recipes, and I ran out of time, and so now I'm going to make good on that promise. So the good thing about recipes, as you all know, is you don't need to be a chef. You don't need to be really good with knowing how to mix things. You know, somebody did the hard work of putting it together, and you just copy the instructions. And we want it to be even simpler than that. We want just somebody to click a button, it spits out the answer, and then you load it in an Excel file. So, you know, that's why the chef hat. So here's the question that I was trying to answer. So if you go to New York City's open data portal, there are very popular data sets. And sometimes you can correlate them to like this job application filings breakdown. You know, like if you go there, it's Department of Buildings. When you do some construction, you need to file a permit, and you know they keep track of that. They publish that as open data. It has about, I believe, around 30,000 rows, about 215 megabytes. If I'm a community board member and I just have a question, okay, what are in the last 90 days, can you give me a breakdown of all the job application filings? And I want it broken down by, you know, how much was the projected project size, and I want it broken down by borough, and I want it for my community board. So we have this, I promise, but because this is a lightning talk, maybe you can look at it later, the cookbook with the recipe. It's here, basically, and I hope to get all your other recipes as we maybe over time collect easy ways to maybe we can catalog questions you have, and then maybe people don't have to do the same thing and they just run the recipe, right? Also, I'm here to plug actually a study we're working with the University of Pittsburgh. So we were fortunate to get a National Science Foundation grant to study how to make robust civic data ecosystems. You know, a lot of our honorable guests earlier today, they kept repeating how data is the new concrete. And I think for it to be the new concrete to fulfill its promise, you know, you want something that's so basic to be something that's freely available, right? That you don't have to lock yourself into a solution that you can, you know, much like the way we came up with, I don't know if you know the story of railroads. Back when the things were getting started, people were having different gauges, and people cannot connect from state to state because the gauges were different, and that's why they came up with the word standard, right? Standards. So if we can come up with a robust, if we are building the new digital government using in this digital century, maybe we should adopt open source civic data ecosystem. So we want to interview some cohorts about people who are interested in open data. So go to this website, and we'd love to find out what your opinion is as we try to build this ecosystem. So we're working with the Western Pennsylvania Regional Data Center on that out of the University of Pittsburgh. So that's my talk for now, and I hope to see some of your questions that you want quick answers to. And just as a point of reference, one thing that we were able to do, just to let you know how fast it is, we downloaded all 28,311 rows of data from New York City, about 17 gigabytes, and we were able to analyze and give an answer in 25 seconds, dealing on a laptop. So it's that fast. So, yep. Looking forward to your questions, and hopefully we can build a lot of these answers together. Thank you.
So hello, everyone. My name is Kyla Browne, and I am a Civic Innovation Fellow at BetaNYC, and I'm also studying Environmental Studies at Queens College. So today we're going to be talking about, So today we're going to be talking about mapping. As a fellow, my equity mapping project is part of a partnership with the North Brooklyn Parks Alliance and Council District 34. And so as a fellow, I am responsible for mapping amenities and street structures in publicly available spaces. So affluent areas often have a comprehensive online record of neighborhood features. So we're focused on mapping areas that are lacking this level of detail on a platform called OpenStreetMap, or OSM. So neighborhood parks are extremely important, and living spaces are also essential to the well-being of residents. And it's important that information on the condition of these areas is available and people know how to navigate them. So yeah, we map structures like green spaces, playgrounds, water fountains, lighting fixtures, bike racks, curbs, water fountains, and buildings like community centers and housing. And these features show up with little graphic icons on OSM as seen on this screen here. We have been working in North Brooklyn, so as fellows take our beloved friend, the L train, to our general site area, get our clipboard set up, and walk over to our mapping site. And sometimes we get questions from people or looks of curiosity because we look very engaged. And some people have also even voiced their own personal concerns about their areas to us. So we document these features on our field papers. As seen here, these are 2 of my actual field papers. And these are much more convenient for us to use when we're on the go and out in the field. And then we map these features as points, lines, and polygons in OSM remotely. So yeah, our earliest mapping sites were all centralized around East Williamsburg. And here we have Cooper Park houses, Cooper Park, and Orient Grove. So the first NYCHA development that we mapped was Cooper Park houses, and this is a decent amount of area. So it took 2 trips, and we sort of split the area among ourselves into parts to make it more manageable. So yeah, we mapped benches as points and documented details like how many people could fit on the bench and what material it's made of. So for instance, we can note down that a bench seats 10 people, is made of metal and wood, and is red, just like this one here. And the goal is always to get as much detail as possible to make this part of a growing record. Sorry. So we mapped features like stairs and wheelchair ramps as well, which are mapped as lines that are connected to walkways, also known as footpaths in OSM. And we also noted there's a building in the background that says Cooper Park Houses Management Office. So building titles are another feature that we're interested in noting down and specifying in OSM. We also mapped areas like basketball courts and documented information about the operating hours of the entire park. So yet another area we mapped is Sternberg Park, which is further into East Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and one of our most recent sites. So in addition to mapping what's inside the sites, we also map what's around it. So we walk the perimeter and get the street structures, which include the sidewalks, fire hydrants, lighting fixtures, pedestrian crossings. So yeah. So, and this is a picture that I took of Sternberg Park when we were there recently. And from the perspective of a mapper in training, and I can identify in this picture alone a bench with no backrest, a bench with a backrest, a lamp, a field, and a basketball court, which is a polygon. So this is one of the playground areas of Sternberg Park, which is mapped as a polygon, but also the structures within the polygon are mapped as play structures, within a playground, I mean, sorry. So here we can see like various climbing structures, and also multiple slides were out of the frame of this picture. So this is a little swing area. It's kind of from a side view, so you mostly see the like description of the playground. But in a swing area is yet another polygon, and we could see like a street lamp, swings for children, and an accessible swing. So these are all important features to note down in the tags of OSM so that data can easily be found when running an analysis. And also the grass areas surrounding the perimeter of the park are yet another polygon. So once we transfer all the data we've collected onto OSM, the edits are immediately reflected on the map, which is useful to start innovating ideas for that area. It's amazing that these areas that were once pretty much void of any information on the features are now filled with points, lines, and polygons. Also, OSM is an ever-growing community, and we are grateful for the users who take the time to verify our edits. So yeah, the areas that we've mapped are all valuable places that should be preserved and represented and heard. Nevertheless, we are coming to these areas as outsiders. The people who live in these areas have a very deep understanding of their neighborhood and how changes to it will impact their lives. So it's important that we understand the viewpoint of the community members and utilize their input as much before making decisions. So smaller neighborhood parks and areas that house marginalized groups deserve equitable funding to adequately provide for the needs of the people in the community. And community leaders and members can advocate for change with the data, such as fixing sidewalks, fixing lighting fixtures, or even take on an urban planning perspective where they could determine which features could be added to improve the quality of life in that area. So yeah, getting geospatial data by surveying is one of the best ways to get accurate information, and it's essential that we do this field work. And I encourage you all to go out and map for equity. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So once again, I have to thank our awesome speakers for making it through and showing you all the things that they've been working on recently and all the things that they wanted to communicate to you in this discotheque. And so I'd love it if, as they were speaking, all the thoughts that came to mind, any questions, comments, anything that you would like to ask them, feel free. They're all going to be seated on stage and they'll be taking all of your questions. And so, yeah, we encourage you to ask what's been on your mind. Cool. Sure.
Okay, so there's so many tools out there. How do you know which one to use?
I can kind of take that one first because I experimented with a lot of different tools in my project. And I think what I found was basically like, yeah, there are so many tools with so many different features, so many different advantages, disadvantages, you know, features that might help you or might not help your project specifically, right? So I think that for me, it was mainly just trial and error and asking around, hearing about suggestions, and yeah, looking throughout. I mean, I know both of them built tools, so maybe look into their tools as well.
Yeah, I think what I would say about that is that the right tool will kind of find you. I would say what I would do first is just build a minimum viable product of whatever you're trying to build and try to validate as quickly as possible with the actual users. And then as you hear that user feedback, you'll sort of be guided or have better criteria for which tool to search for.
And the reason why we built what we did was, you know, there's always a place for different kind of tools depending on your use case and your requirements. But we often found that there were people who were just interested in the answer, right? And they didn't need to log in, do single sign-on, or click on a chart. They just want, give me this KPI, this indicator. I just want the indicator. So that's what the use case we optimize for.
A question for Joel. You mentioned developing something based on a 311 data. Obviously, that is a massive data set. In terms of having a front end and easily accessible information, could you elaborate more on it? And also, if you can talk about challenges that you had, you know, interpreting 311 data.
Yeah, with the tool we built, our ambition was, I don't know if there are people in the room who are familiar with core utils. Basically, in the Linux, Unix, Mac world, core utils are these command line tools like cat, ls, you know, like awk, you know, like single commands that you run this command and then it spits out what it needs to do. It's focused on that thing. So what we built was, what's the least common denominator data format that is universally supported? CSVs. Everybody can do CSVs. from the mainframes to your latest data science tool, they all can consume CSVs and export CSVs. So we said, okay, let's have something that somebody can write a command line and then point it to a CSV, it comes out with an answer. So that's what we optimize for, and then people can wrap things around it. The tool we built was basically, I don't know if people are familiar with Visual Studio Code. Here, people use it. One of the magic things that made me switch to Visual Studio Code is if you try to do find in files, and you put in a query, it's like even in less than a second, it tells you what matches. And QSV was built by basically the core of it was built by somebody who built that. So that's why it's so fast. Yeah.
Hey. Hey, hi, my name is Nathan. I love your guys' projects. They're all super cool. I'm curious, I know like most of you are doing this as like not as a full-time thing, as a side thing, but I'm just out of curiosity, if you had like more resources and more time, or if you like, how would you want to take this project to the next step? Like, how would you want to see that data being used? And are there ways that people in the community can help leverage the data and leverage the work you've done to, you know, enact change at the government level? Erik.
So for my project, I think that I still want to like do some more work on it as well. I think the next step for us is to actually like develop the UI so that it is accessible for users. Right now, we sort of just have the information saved somewhere and like a means of retrieving that information over and over, but not really any way to like give it out to people in a way that is like both easily digestible and like easily readable and usable. So that would be probably what we want to work on next. Also, we wanted to incorporate a open data set, which was released, which actually lists the general meeting and the council meeting for each of the different community boards as well per month. So by incorporating that, we can like sort of both confirm our own information and see if like there is any discrepancies between that open data set as well as our what we were scraping from their websites. So that would probably be the next steps. After that, I think it would just be sort of cool to see what other people in the community are able to do with that. If like any of the tools or scrapers that we developed could be used to scrape any other meetings. There are a lot of different like volunteer councils in New York City. There's the community education councils, the community boards, lots of different things. So maybe these tools could be used to sort of develop even larger calendars and make these meetings, which are somewhat of an enigma for a lot of people, even more accessible.
Well, I had a follow-up question for you, Erik. Have you explored what it would take to get the community boards to standardize how they publish their meetings?
That was something that we discussed, Lizzie and I, but we are not really sure. Some of the community boards, I think there were like 3 or 4 of them, whose calendars had not even been updated in like months, if not like over a year. So to then like ask them to like put in resources to update it or to standardize it seemed somewhat unlikely. So we thought that in the interim between this and hopefully some sort of standardization measure that happens in the future, this can be something that at least offers people who want to get involved a means of getting involved. But hopefully, maybe this tool can inspire some sort of legislative change or something to encourage further standardization between how community boards actually report their meetings.
I also think it's really cool that you said that the tools could be used to potentially like scrape data for other types of meetings, which obviously wouldn't get standardized by community boards doing it. So I think that's very cool.
Hi, my question's for Kyla. I know your project, obviously you did one small snapshot. Have you thought about how to replicate that for other places? And, you know, doing the surveying in person obviously takes time. So have you thought about scaling it up and doing it bigger?
Yeah, so I think that it comes with numbers. There's only about 6 of us fellows, and not all of us can coordinate at the same time to be at the same sites always. So we do what we can, honestly. It would be great to have more people on board, and that's kind of our goal ultimately, is to get more people to want to do this and to want to be invested in their communities. So I would love to see more people like serving their neighborhoods. It's really interesting to walk around on foot as well, even though sometimes maybe the weather conditions may not be the best, or other circumstances. Being around your neighborhood and actually going out in the field, there's nothing quite like it. You kind of have to do it to really get that level of detail and granularity.
I have a follow-up question for Lizzie over here to your right. What are the other things that you would be wanting to map in regards to civic engagement besides the chicken coops?
Chicken coops are very important, but seems that I've solved for that problem. And yeah, I care about placemaking sites generally. I think that there's so much hidden in plain sight, to use the data and design tagline in New York, and adding that into the public knowledge is really important to me. Outside of that, I've been really interested in mapping eviction and housing data, which I previewed a little bit, as well as some CCRB and police-related incident data as well. I'm really interested and excited about Retool as a potential organizing tool for both collecting and displaying data as well as a data aggregator to help scale civic developers' existing work.
Just a follow-up question then, does like all of the data sets to go into Retool need to have like some type of geo component, or?
No, definitely not. Retool can connect to any REST API, GraphQL API, data format. We're pretty agnostic. You can also transform it from within Retool. Doesn't have to be mapping data. That was just a single component of hundreds. So for example, you could bring in the calendar into Retool, for example, to build an MVP or your ultimate project. Any type of data from arrays to objects of arrays, and so on.
My next question then is going to go to Joelle. When do we get a demo to see, the open data platform in ChatGPT?
I think somebody in this room will build it, but our attempt at it, you'll see that in the cookbook. I mean, for the job application filings example, I'll put it up tonight so you can play with it yourself.
Because I have long wanted to ask how many 311 service requests are in my community board, or like, I talk to Siri on a daily basis trying to set my lights, and to find out what the weather's going to be. I find it interesting to be like, how many bike lanes blockage 311 service requests have been filed for Driggs Avenue? Like that type of information, I feel like we now can finally start to see the light.
Yeah, I think one thing, like I want to call out what Lizzie did, is I think one untapped potential that maybe we should start thinking about is, how do we tap ourselves as resources for asking questions and for giving answers and for helping with build using different tools? I'm not saying QSV will be the silver bullet. It's one of many. So maybe we should revisit, we're really truly blessed here in New York City. Maybe we can advance the state of the art, and how do we actively tap this great resource, this community? That's my call to action.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, like, if you have any initiative for, you guys are working on different kind of tools, and I can see from you out of your interest, and that's a different kind of purpose. As a New Yorker, there are many things I want to know. Is there any repository or any catalog that you are creating somewhere in GitHub or somewhere? Like, if I build something out of my curiosity, not necessarily that I would like to be involved as a volunteer, but if I develop something, it could be as simple as a Jupyter notebook, but it's the pipeline and everything is there. Do you have any kind of platform like somewhere in public that where I can just push my code or add something, suggestions, so that you would have the catalog of things if I want to see that where is the wildest parties are going on, where is the social events are going on, if I want to volunteer myself. So probably someone is building that. And you guys have, can create some catalog if does not already exist. So I just wanted to know that if something like that exists, or if it doesn't, do you have a plan like that to do that? Thank you.
There's BetaNYC's next project. A catalog of solutions, answers.
On top of our community data portal.
Oops.
Sounds like maybe
That's an inside joke, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe a good spot for the open data project page as well, potentially. Not to give you another thing to maintain.
I just sent a text message to someone inside of the city to talk about recipes moving forward.
Okay, so there's so much data out there. How do you prioritize which data you will map?
So we are working the fellows are working, in north of Brooklyn. So I know people, when you think of Williamsburg and Bushwick, you think of the gentrified parts and the more affluent parts, but we're focused on those areas are already mapped, basically. So we're focused on the areas that aren't mapped, the areas with low-income people, or the areas where there's a small neighborhood park where there's not a single detail mapped on OSM. So we're really prioritizing communities that are in need of that information to be represented to the public.
Okay, on that note, thanks for the awesome answer, Kyla. As we clear and reach closing time, I just want to thank you all for being an awesome audience. And I want to know if we can give our speakers just a quick round of applause for being so cool today. Thank you all so much. And if you have more questions and you want to talk more, feel free to chat with your speaker. They're attendees just like you at this conference. And so feel free to network. But yes, once again, thank you. And you're free to move on to your future sessions and to chat if you wish. Thank you all.